Already seeing some battles heating up out there at the Green Tree practice fields, and probably none of them better than the ones between this wide receiver and this cornerback.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Got to tell you, man, even when I'm talking to a recruit last night, Jalen Hollywood Bell, he's telling me he's watching Joshisa Trader and Daryl Porter Jr. battling out there. I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'm so happy to be joined by one of the great friends of the show who's been kicking so much butt with CanesInsight.com, and they've really stepped up their content lately. Brad Tejeda joins us. Brad, how you doing, sir?
Great, man. Thank you as always for letting me jump on and talk some Canes football with you, man. There's no better place, so we got to talk some Canes football with the fans.
Dude, and I'm not surprised that Daryl Porter is out there playing well in practice because he's a senior. He was Miami's top cover corner last season, but I'm super impressed that Joshisa Trader, who's an early enrollee freshman, is already out there battling, making plays. And I think he and Porter have a nice competition brewing, Brad. Talk to me about what you're hearing about that.
Yeah, man. I mean, you've been at practice, so you would know better than me, man. But from everything I've heard, obviously, anybody that follows recruiting like myself, we knew leading up to this point that someone like Joshisa Trader was going to be a football player, right? Everything that we heard, we have now been able to witness or hear for ourselves on Green Tree. And I thought one of the biggest things with the Daryl Porter and Joshisa Trader matchup that you brought up was, how are you going to respond through adversity? How are you going to respond when you are no longer the Joshisa Trader that's dominating against every competition on the high school football field? You have finally met your match, right? And a guy like Daryl Porter, who you mentioned, is a seasoned veteran quarterback on this football team and is probably going to be one of the best corners on this football roster. So having a guy like Joshisa Trader to work each and every day and perfect his craft against someone like Daryl Porter is obviously great things. But what I liked, again, was just being relentless. And, you know, Joshisa Trader did get him on that first time on Porter, but Porter came back, jammed him up a couple times, and JoJo got caught up by surprise, right? But he didn't slow down. He didn't stop. His next 3 or 4 plays, he ended up bombing and scoring for touchdowns. So just being able to respond through adversity, it's good to see. And that battle is going to be something to watch for quite a while. Not only Joshisa Trader, but Nikar as well has been making some moves, and Robbie Washington. So we got 3 young guys that I think are very ready to showcase what they got on the next level at the wide receiver.
Well, and let's not forget Ray Joseph either. Ray's doing really well. And another thing, Brad, that we can talk about is, and this is not surprising at all with, you know, the type of players Mario Cristobal is recruiting and the type of culture that he's trying to create here. So Miami's on spring break this week. Like the entire campus, they're doing whatever. They're going back home to their families. But I think a lot, if not most, of the football players have stayed behind to continue working out this week. Like, there are not official practices this week. Their next official practice is Tuesday, but I'm seeing pictures on social media. A lot of these guys Mario Cristobal recruited, like Chris Johnson Jr., who's got a big opportunity at running back. He's at the facility working out, and Ray Joseph and Joshisa Trader are working out together this week. They've sent out pictures on social media. So just because they're on break, these guys are not stopping.
Yeah, this time of year for Miami, this is not Miami spring break. It's just Miami spring. There is no break. Right. These guys are taking this seriously. I mean, not only us fans are tuned in and ready for this season coming up, but your first game is against University of Florida right here in Gainesville. So you got to be all locked in, just like your show, right? And you got to make sure that you're focused and ready for that football game. And it starts in spring and then leads into fall. So a lot of these guys are probably doing just that. You're probably just not going to see them on social media posting, and that's not a bad thing, right? I think what you're starting to see in the last 2 years with bringing in Mario Cristobal type football players, from their mentality standpoint to their physique, how they're able to develop a lot quicker. We're able to see the results on the football field. These guys aren't worried about the social media. They're not worried about the glitz and glamour. They just want to line it up, play football, and win football games. And that's not only from the football players currently on the football team, but like you mentioned, talking to a recruit last night, I talk to recruits all the time, and that's the one common denominator. It's just from a mentality mindset standpoint, how these young men carry themselves, how they embody the game of football. They eat, breathe, sleep football. A lot of these kids, they started at the age of 4, 5, 6 years old, and this is all they know.
Yeah, when I was talking with Jalen Bell yesterday, I encourage everyone to check out that interview. It's on our YouTube channel. It's on our audio feed. If you missed it, he's a 4-star defensive back out of a powerhouse program, Grayson High School in Georgia. And the love football thing, that's one of the boxes that he checks off, Brad, because, he told me not only did he go to practice last Friday at Miami, but he and his dad woke up very early to go sit in on the defensive back meetings. So he wanted to kind of grasp a lot of the academic stuff on that as well. And let's go back to Green Tree. So we talk about Joshisa Trader and Nikar, a couple of true freshmen, early enrollees who are doing really well. On the defensive side of the football, someone who's already earning a ton of praise from his defensive coordinator, Lance Guidry, is Cameron Bobby Pruitt, who's an early enrollee linebacker. And I'm telling you, man, the two guys that Miami brought in from Alabama are going to end up being, I think, two of the crown jewels of this class, and both underrated guys. I think Pruitt eventually earned his 4th star, but Cole McConaughey, the edge rusher who led the state of Alabama in sacks last year, somehow was only a 3-star guy. But I mean, let's start with Pruitt, Brad, because this seems like someone who, even at linebacker, may be able to get on the field year one.
Again, going back to the football mindset mentality, Cameron Pruitt is at the top of the list as far as some of these recruits that we brought in this last class. And he's very diverse, and he's someone that could bring a lot to the table. And I think what's very unique about him is his football IQ. He understands, and he could get onto things very well. And I think from a coaching standpoint, those are the easiest kids that you can put into game situations very quickly, when they can understand and learn what you're trying to teach and just adapt very quickly. And that's exactly what Cameron Pruitt does, along with the intangibles of what you need on the football field. Cameron Pruitt does everything you need on and off the field. So I think Cameron Pruitt has a very good shot at possibly not only just getting some playing time, but he could start in some schemes and rotations, maybe even throughout the year. There's so many diverse guys in the linebacker room, between Popo Guerrero, Marcellus Pulley, and Bobby Washington, and then switching Malik Bryant down to be more of a pass rusher on the outside will give someone like Cameron Pruitt a lot more opportunities as well. So the flexibility is going to be right there for Lance Guidry. Not only him, but I know Zaquan Patterson is at the top of the list on that defensive side of the board that wants to be somewhat of an instant impact. Because when you look at that secondary right now, that's probably one of the only position groups I would circle and kind of want to see how interested we are going into the transfer portal. Because I do think we're missing 1 or 2 more guys there, but it's going to be a lead by committee group. And I think we have the pieces to definitely get it done. And it's going to be exciting to see some of the young guys like Zaquan Patterson, Cameron Pruitt, really step up and mature throughout the football season.
I'm glad you brought up Zaquan Patterson too, because when I was out at practice on Monday and Wednesday, he was definitely one of the young guys who really stood out to me. Really looks like he belongs out there. I'm curious, Brad, to your take at the quarterback position. We all know who the starter is going to be, and yeah, Cam Ward looks really good. He's passes my eye test so far. Okay, but there is a competition for the backup job, and there's high stakes there, Brad, because obviously, whoever doesn't win the backup job or doesn't come, in 3rd or comes in 4th, you never know who may decide to hit the transfer portal. From what I've seen out there, it looks pretty even, and I'm pretty pleased with the way all the quarterbacks have looked. Definitely impressed with Pathfinder, who I've never watched before. I continually am impressed with Jakari Brown. And I also want to note to people, when we're out there looking at drills with no contact, you don't really see the full menu of what Jakari can do, because he's so good running the football, breaking tackles, shedding tackles. And, you could maybe say the same thing about Pathfinder, who had success on the ground at Albany the last couple of years. So we're not really seeing the competition ramp up yet, but things look pretty even there. What's been the buzz at Kane's Insight about who may end up being the number 2?
I mean, first and foremost, when you bring in a guy like Reese Pathfinder, we signed him before we even announced or got Cam Ward officially right. Yeah. So you already knew from a mentality standpoint, Reese was coming into this program with something to prove and possibly be that starting quarterback, right? You signed Cam Ward, and obviously, as we know, he is QB1. But now Reese Poffenbarger, how do you respond to something like that? You already know that guy that's in the room is probably going to lead this football team. But how do you respond through adversity? How do you respond to competition? And I think one of the strongest things that Reese brings to the table is just from a mindset standpoint where he wants to be the best in the room. Even though Cam Ward is the most talented guy, Reese is not going to sit back from anybody. And that's what you want in a quarterback room, is pure competition. And Reese is a guy that can also make big time plays. When a pocket breaks down, he's able to utilize that. He's, somewhat to like a Johnny Manziel, I would say, not nearly as good as far as in college, obviously, that we have seen, but just from a skill set standpoint, what he brings to the table. The only thing I would say with Reese, similar to Johnny Manziel, is, sometimes when you try to make those big plays, it ends up not working out for you. So you have to make sure you don't just go straight to big plays. You got to be able to be conservative at time and take what the defense gives you. You don't want to put the offense in bad situations. So that's the only thing I would say with Reese right now. And then obviously with Jakari and Emery, those two guys are coming back either off an injury or with a lot to prove. And I think this spring game, April 13th. Yeah, I'm thinking of August 31st already. So April 13th, we're going to see a lot of Emery and Jakari, in my opinion. And it's going to really be able to show what Jakari can do, like you mentioned, with his legs, being able to go live. And I'm interested to see what happens. Me personally, I think Reese is going to be quarterback too, but I'm open to the comp. Said, man, I'm with whatever the coaches decide. As long as Cam Ward is QB1 like he is, I'm all for it.
Well, we got a lot to get to still on this episode of Locked On Canes. Brad Tejeda from Canes Insight is nice enough to join us. We got to talk some recruiting, including one of the top wide receivers in the class of 2025. Even though he's committed somewhere else, he's just scheduled an official visit down at the U for this summer. We have so much to get to. Brad Tejeda is with us. My friends, we're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And I'm only getting started with eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always know exactly what you're looking for. You always get exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you so much for making this Wednesday episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Mark your calendar for the Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown Show this Monday, March 18th at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Experts Andy Patton and Isaac Shade are going to break down their brackets and discuss everything you need to know to fill out a winning bracket and prepare for this year's NCAA tournament. Find the Locked On Bracket Breakdown on Monday, March 18th on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And yes, I will be watching that, even though my Hurricanes are not going to be dancing this March. Their ACC tournament ended in a whimper last night. Thankfully, we've got plenty of football to talk about here with Brad Tejeda. So, Brad, the receiver that I was alluding to in the last segment was Dallas Wilson, five-star wide receiver out of Tampa Bay Tech, high school out there in Tampa, he's verbally committed to Oregon, but he's been on campus in Miami a number of times, and he's locked in an official visit for June 7th. So, I don't know how long. I don't know if Cristobal was recruiting this kid back when he was at Oregon. He's certainly recruiting him now at Miami. You hearing anything there on Miami's chances with one of the top wide receivers in this class?
Yeah, this is one in particular that Miami has circled and put as a top priority from the beginning. And I expect this to go down to the wire all the way to the end of June. You mentioned Dallas Wilson locking in that OV to Miami on June 7th, despite missing that trip this past week on that last practice that they had before spring was to be at. So that's great news for Miami. The only thing I'm a little concerned about right now at this point is obviously, as we know, with the official visits, The timing is everything in that month of June. And it looks like Dallas Wilson does have a OV locked in to Oregon that last weekend of June. So that's going to be something to look out for. But as we know, Mario Cristobal has no problem going head-to-head against programs to get a guy to flip. We've done this many times already. And this is a school that he's very familiar with. And I know Dallas Wilson is one of the top priority wide receivers, not only in the country, but for Miami. So I expect Miami to go the distance for that guy. But there's also other recruits that we've been looking at recently. We have a running back out of Lee County, Georgia, by Osman Croma. That's going to be a name to watch here recently. Florida State's been very high on the radar for him, but Miami is making him probably the top running back on their list right now. So I would expect a lot of movement and traction for him. You also got a local guy out of Miami Central by the name of Floyd Boucard, 6'4", 280. Defensive lineman, was recently at Miami this past weekend. He's another guy that's been getting a ton of offers from pretty much every school in the nation the past week and a half. And I think Miami has been doing a very good job at recruiting him, making him feel like a priority. And as we know, Miami Central, that's a pipeline that we've always had with guys like Ruben Bain and others in the past. So I would look for those two guys. But hey, one of the other position groups that we all like to talk about specifically in the 2025 class is going to be the cornerback and secondary room. You know, having a new cornerback coach in Chevis Jackson, a lot of recruits and a lot of people around are trying to still figure out who he is as a person and as a coach. You know, how is he going to develop these guys currently on a football team? Well, the good thing is in this 2025 class, it seems like Chevis has been doing a very good job at least starting to get some traction on a lot of these guys, not even including the local guys. I mean, you got guys like Jalen Hollywood Bell, who you talked to recently out of Grayson High School. You also have Jabari Antoine out of Westgate High School, who's a current LSU commit that he's been doing a lot of groundwork on. You have Javion Holiday out of Duncanville High School up in Texas. And you also have Onus O. Knubini. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Probably butchered it. But, hey, Heatherwood High School, that's another guy. I mean, those are 4 or 5 guys that are not very local that Chevis is doing a very good job at traction for. And, again, that's not including the guys like Ben Hanks Jr., Bryce Fitzgerald, Amari Wallace, Chris Ewald, and DJ Pickett. And I know Bryce Fitzgerald in particular, he's down to 3 schools in Florida, Miami, and USC. He's been on campus a couple times. I believe he will be back on campus March 28th and will be setting a commitment for May 24th on his mom's birthday. And he does have an OV planned in June for Miami, so that's a name to circle. But I would expect that to be a Florida-Miami battle.
I'm glad you brought up Chevis Jackson because, again, like I think Jamil Adai, who was the previous cornerbacks coach, probably a better coach than he was a recruiter, which makes sense why he's now off to the NFL. And so I haven't had a chance to speak to Coach Jackson yet. But like you said, talking to players he's recruiting, it seems like he's got that same sort of relentless mentality that Mario Cristobal has, Brad, because, yeah, when I spoke with Jalen Bell last night, he told me he's literally spoken to Coach Jackson every day since Jackson took the Miami job. Like, I was like, this guy agrees to sign a deal with Miami. He left Marshall for Miami. And then the first thing he does, he starts calling and texting recruits, which is exactly what Mario Cristobal needs, because, you know, Miami has brought in some good defensive backs in the last couple of classes, but they've also missed on a lot of the high profile 5-star targets. And they need to start shoring that up a little bit. Couple of other players, Brad Tejeda, you mentioned to me that you wanted to talk about who were at practice last week. Yep. Center Isaac Spike Sowells, who was on campus for the last practice. He's a class of 2025. And there's also a top class of 2026 defensive lineman, Preston P.J. Carey, top player. I know 2026 we're looking ahead, but Cristobal's probably already recruiting 2028 guys. So we're really not looking that far ahead. What can you tell me about some of these other players who took in practice last week?
Yeah, before we get to Preston, I know 2026 is a far time away, but once I start talking about this young man, you're going to realize why we're talking about 2026 right now. But going back to Isaac Spike Sowells, this is one of the top centers, not only in the country, but high on Miami's board. And this is a guy, again, we went back to the beginning when we talked about this on the show, mentality standpoint, football IQ, and just being born into this, right? This young man in Isaac Spike Sowells, he was born into being a football player. Not only did his father play college and in the NFL, his sister plays college basketball, and he has 2 distant cousins by the name of George Cumby and Earl the Great Campbell. Yes, Earl Campbell.
Wow.
So this young man at the age of 5 years old, Alex Donno, was already in the film room with his father breaking down plays. So when this guy goes on official visits to places like the University of Miami, which he was there this past weekend, he would break down film with Alex Mirabal for hours like it's nothing. And I mean, this is a guy that, when I tell you from a mentality standpoint, what he brings to a football team and wanting to be a leader at that center position, this is a young man that you're looking for. And he's out of the Midwest. He's from Louisville, Kentucky. Most of his offers are in the Midwest, but one of the big things that appealed him about Miami is the amount of effort and time that this staff puts into a guy from the Midwest like himself. And he could really see himself out in Coral Gables, and it won't be his last time in Miami. He will be dropping a top 5 in late April, early May, and he will be committing, I believe, late July, early August. So I would look out for Isaac Spike Sowells. That's going to be a name to look out for, because as we know, is one of the top priorities in recruiting. We missed out on a guy in Connor Liu a couple cycles ago. This is one you're going to want to circle.
And what? Let's talk about PJ from 2026.
Yeah, when you talk about Preston PJ Carey, as soon as you Google this young man's name, you're going to want to look at his birth certificate. You're going to want to find out there's no way this young man is 16 years old, weighing 287 pounds at 6'4.5", which is what he currently weighed in at Miami last weekend, right?
Wow.
Yes, this is a 2026 kid who started playing football. Again, going back to roots, going back to football mentality. This is a young man that started playing at the age of 5 years old and started working out in the gym and weight room with his dad at the age of 9, going on the treadmill, pumping the dumbbells. His dad was a former, I believe, a weightlifter. So he already understands what the weight room brings to the table, right? Yeah. Then you go turn on his tape and everything stands out. If Brock Lesnar and J.J. Watt had a young man in high school right now, this is exactly what it would look like. And a guy in Preston PJ Carey. This guy is a straight freaking animal. At the end of his 8th grade year, Alex Donno, he personally sent his film to a bunch of D1 athletes. He got recognized, went to a LSU football camp in his 8th grade summer year, destroyed all of the competition. I'm talking about 11th and 12th graders at 8th grade, got his first D1 offer at LSU, and that's what started his trend for recruitment. And as we know, anybody that goes to IMG, look out for the University of Miami. And he has been at IMG for the last 3 months, where he is transferred from St. Anthony's, New York, and he is doing amazing things already there in just 3 months there at IMG. He's a guy that can do just about anything on the football field, Alex, and I would expect Miami to be heavily involved. This is going to be a guy that every school in the country is going to want.
So can I get this guy to pull an Armando Blunt and reclassify? Well, he can do the full Armando Blunt experience, where he can reclassify, then he can troll Florida State and then commit to Miami the way Armando Blunt did. I would love it.
I mean, the PJ is one incredible human being. I mean, I asked him what he did in his free time, and he said he liked to play chess. And a big guy like himself, I'm like, why do you play chess? And he said it's a mind game thing. It's chess is very similar to playing the defensive line position, right? You can make one move, or you can think about making one move that can react to 3 moves. But at the end of the day, you have to worry about that opponent and not getting checkmate. It's very similar to being a defensive end and beating that offensive lineman and cornering that quarterback to get a sack. So it's all about mind games and being able to beat your opponent. And he uses the chess into his NFL game. And I thought that was very extraordinary smart of him.
I still want to talk with Brad Tejeda about biggest needs for Miami coming up in the transfer portal, because it's going to be opening a little over a month from now once again. And I do think there are some needs that Miami should address. Mario Cristobal did say they're going to be aggressive. He said that in an interview with Joe Rose this past week. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We got Brad Tejeda from Canes Insight with us. We are not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Bros, you know that I'm nowhere near done when it comes to FanDuel. We're making money this basketball season. Conference tournaments, NCAA tournament is coming up. You can say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Sometimes by the end of the first 2 days, I know my bracket is destroyed, but you know what? With FanDuel, I can keep betting on those games throughout the tournament. I will do just that this year. Whether you're betting on the big upset or on a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers on FanDuel get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down those nets. Do it all, my friends, with FanDuel. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes. By the way, first episode of the day. We're going to have an episode this evening with former Miami Hurricane center K.C. Jones, one of the all-time greats. Right now, we've got Brad Tejeda on with us. So, Brad, you did kind of preview earlier an area defensive back that Miami might want to look into the transfer portal for. So, especially, I think they could probably use another safety because, the guy that I feel best about is Mish Powell. I think there could be a drop-off after that, but they have more bodies in the safety room. The cornerback room, at some point, Damari Brown and Robert Stafford are going to be practicing again. They haven't been so far, so that room has looked really thin. I think Miami could use some additions there. Any other position groups you think Miami should think about adding somebody? Because it may sound crazy given all the bodies that they have, but I think they might want to add a running back as well.
I think, first and foremost with the secondary, you brought up Mish Powell. I think originally the plan when bringing Mish Powell in was to make sure he was that safety guy, someone that could fill in for Cam Kitchens. But what
he might play nickel. Yeah, that's right.
But what Lance Gidry realized, right, was that this could be a guy that we could utilize in other areas. He could be a guy that you could probably stick on that slot guy and be able to shut down or cover him one-on-one. So I think Mish Powell may be more of a nickel guy in this defense in a lot of schemes that we're going to run. So looking at a safety might be in our best interest, but I think at the end of the day, you just need a secondary guy, whether it's a corner, nickel, or a safety that just can make plays, that can go around the field, and that is someone that you have to watch on the offensive side of the football, just someone that scares or intimidates the offense. So anybody that jumps in that portal, I expect Miami to go after. And then going back on the offense side of the ball, you mentioned running back. That's an interesting take, and I wouldn't mind that actually. But I think wide receiver, as much buzz as wide receivers are making, especially some of the young guys like Ray, Nikar, JoJo, and Robbie Washington, I still think this team could use another dominant wide receiver. I think Isaiah Horton, it's up to him to take that next jump. We know what guys like Jacoby George and Xavier Strepo can do, and I know that they'll definitely be able to bring what they can to the table for Cam Ward. I think the way we use our tight ends this year is going to be a lot different than what we're used to the last couple of years, which will help. But if I had to guess, I would say if a big-time wide receiver enters that portal, we're going to be one of the top teams to be out on the lookout for, in my opinion. You only got 10. I think you got 10 or 11 guys in that room. You don't know what's going to happen to a guy like maybe Michael Redding after spring, but you still need bodies, and you want to get a quality guy that can make a difference in that room.
And here's why you're 100% right, because I've had to revisit my take on that because I was really impressed watching the receivers last week, and I thought to myself, maybe they don't need to add somebody. But then I think it was David Lake at Inside the U made a great point that you got Cam Ward as your quarterback for 1 year. You go all in. Even if you feel pretty good about what you have, and there are, that there's not a whole lot of proven experience there. Xavier Restrepo, by far the most. Jacoby George is up there as well. You don't have a lot of proven experience beyond that. So I can understand the argument, the position Miami's in, where they have, arguably the best on paper quarterback that they've had in many, many years, ready to step up this season. Give him as many options and as many toys as possible. So from that side of it, Brad, even though it may not be the most glaring need right now, Cam Ward is your quarterback. I think you go all in if you can for a receiver.
Absolutely. And worst case scenario, if we don't, I think we still got the quality guys to get the job done and take this next season to at least 10 wins, in my opinion. I mean, Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George is one thing, but I think the way they're going to use Elijah Arroyo this season is going to be very telling to see what he can bring to the table in college football, because this is a guy that's been in the program for 2 years. He's been banged up quite a bit. This is going to be his year to really prove to himself and to the football team that he can be that top tight end that we need. And Elijah Lofton, bringing him in is going to push a guy like Elijah Arroyo and along with Riley Williams too. So I like the group all around.
Last question for you, because you're up there. You're in Gainesville. You're always repping Miami up there, but you're in Gator territory. What's the buzz up there like, Brad? Are the Gator fans, are they feeling confident before August 31st? What's been the buzz on the team?
Yeah, I think, I haven't heard much, honestly, with the Florida fans, but I'm sure they are confident. I think a lot with Florida fans is they're not too worried about their football team. They're more worried about the atmosphere that is going to bring to Miami. They're expecting for the crowd, the swamp, the environment to pretty much be too much of a chaos for this Miami football team. But in my opinion, when you bring in a veteran guy like Cam Ward, who's got a lot to the table that he's wanting to bring. I mean, you see the recent YouTube videos with him and a guy like Shador Sanders. This is a guy that wants to compete with best of the best and wants to be the greatest quarterback in college football this upcoming year. And I got my money on Cam Ward. I like us over the Gators in the swamp.
I like it as well. I'm cautiously optimistic heading into, of course, we got a lot to cover before then, but I'm cautiously optimistic right now. Awesome job as always by Brad Tejeda. You want to follow him on Twitter or X, as we now call it, at Tejeda Brad. Check out his work at Canes Insight. Thank you so much, Brad.
Anytime, brother. Have a great day. Go Canes.
And thank everyone so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. For the everydayers, we love you, and we're going to be back later today. Casey Jones, legendary former Miami Hurricane center. A lot of people feel like he's the best center of all time at Miami. So I need to get him into a room with Zach Carpenter and just let them fight, and maybe and whoever comes out is Miami center next year. We'll talk to everyone later today on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.